Can I get a check on if you can see my screen with Thrift Savings Plan? Over.
Sir. We can see it, sir.
All right, good copy. Thank you. Appreciate it. All right, it's noon. Hey, everyone. Colonel Lubchowski here for part 4 or 5. Today, we're going to talk about what is TSP. Again, this is being recorded, and if you have any questions along the way, please just go ahead and put it into the chat or come off mic and just go ahead and ask your question. All questions are appreciated because you may have a question that others may not want to ask, but I will toggle between slides to make sure if there's anything out there that we answer it right away. And again, if you hear any dogs barking, I do apologize because they are in my room right now. One just came back from a walk, so he's a happy dog right now. All right, we are going to talk about Thrift Savings Plan. As every briefing has started, a warning, this is not going to make you rich. This is to build financial literacy. That is the goal of wealth, is to understand your personal finance situation, your whole person concept scenario when it comes to your finances, so that you can just let that person in. Good to go. Help you make smart decisions. Kind of in the old saying, wet your whistle scenario, so that we scratch the surface. We're not going to cover everything in an hour, but now you know where to go, you know what questions to ask, and you know what resources are out there. All right, so next slide here. And when it comes to TSP, before we jump into risk, is I'm not going to tell you where to invest your money. I'm not authorized to do that. I can advise based upon what I guess experts say what you should do. If you would like that type of advice, I'm more than happy to listen and see what you have. But of course, offline, send me an email. I'm happy to look and use experience to say, hey, maybe you want to think about this or this. I'm just going to help you get to that decision point. If you're looking for someone to tell you exactly what to do, you will need to hire a certified financial planner, preferably one who charges by the hour versus one who's actually tied to investment companies who that's how they make money, is through buying and selling. Those people can look at your portfolio and tell you exactly what to do because they're certified to do that. Just want to make sure we all temper expectations, but I will tell you overall TSP guidance. We'll go from there. But we're going to start with risk. If you do not understand risk as we go into the TSP, and then tomorrow we go into the other options and IRAs, individual retirement accounts, if you don't understand risk, that's a very critical point that you're going to be at a disadvantage. So all investments carry risk. When we talk about investment, we're not talking about savings account. A savings account, if it's FDIC or NCUA insured, that's not technically an investment because your money's guaranteed. You're not going to lose it. When we really talk about investments, we're talking about those dollars you put into the stock market in which you're attempting to get a higher return on your money. In return, there is risk. And in an earlier class, risk equals losing your money. So we're just going to talk about a little risk here, the mood of the market. If you ever heard about the market and not sure what it is, we're going to talk a little bit about it so you're familiar with it. Is the stock market is the stock market. It is made up of millions and millions of different stocks, hundreds of thousands of companies, maybe thousands. There's a lot of companies out there. When they go public, they offer stocks in which you are allowed to purchase, sometimes in partial increments, and you own a piece of that company. As the company does good and makes money, the stock goes up. As a company does bad, stock can go down. Your money will go up or down, but stocks are ownership of a company. You don't really own anything really when it comes down to it. You may never physically own that piece of stock because it's really all digital now. Back in the old days when, like AT&T started, they physically had stock, and you've seen it in movies that people find these stock certificates laying around from 1940 and they're like, wow, it's worth millions and millions of dollars. That's old. You won't really see that anymore. Ben and Jerry's is probably the last company that probably has done that with physical things when they went around and sold it to the Vermont folks. But understanding the market's made up of many different companies, and each one has what they call an investment cap. Are they a small business, a medium-sized business, or a large business? And each one of them has risk embedded within it. A large company, we would hope like let's just say a Walmart, a General Electric, a Raytheon company, big companies, right? They're kind of large cap. We assume they're going to stay in business for a long time, so they're less risky. Your medium-sized companies are those who are trying to attain to be the large companies. They're hit or miss sometimes. And then the small companies are your startups or just your small companies that are never really going to grow because they're as big as they want to get. Those are the ones, movers, shakers. You can make a lot of money or you can lose your money. The mood of the market. You probably have seen this in day out if you're watching the stock market. It's also based upon political action and just the world we live in. The war in Iran has dumped the market. I think a few months ago, I remember watching some congressional hearings, and I won't say who it was, but they're like, the Dow was at 50,000. The Dow's no longer at 50,000. Last time I checked yesterday, I think it was at 46. So it goes back and forth. So that is the market. It will move on you, and we'll talk more about it as well. Bad timing. Sometimes there's just bad timing. For example, like I just said, the Dow was at 50,000, and you put your money in at 50,000. And now it's back at 46,000. Bad timing. So your money might be not all gone, but it could be severely diminished because it's just bad timing. And timing the market is almost impossible. With all the AI and technology out there, timing the market is really tough to do unless insider trading, and you probably have all read in the news about insider trading. Martha Stewart back in the day did it. I know some of the papers are saying senators and congressmen and congresspeople are doing that as well. You can see if you have insider knowledge of what's going to happen and you buy that company, it looks pretty fishy. That is really truly the only timing you can get insider, and that's really bad. So we just try not to worry about timing. Sometimes you win, sometimes you lose. I'll talk a little bit more about the market and risk here in a second, but investments like TSP, like we're going to talk about, are not insured. So making sure you all understand risk is as you put money into TSP, as you get matching contributions from the federal government, depending on what system you're in, it's not insured. If you invest outside TSP, there is some insurance out there. However, it's only if your brokerage firm fails. So for example, you invest, let's just say a company like Fidelity. You have an Fidelity account. You have a bunch of money in it and Fidelity fails. You will have some sort of insurance. I think it's up to $500,000. It's called the SIPC insurance. But overall, money you're putting into TSP is not insured. Just making sure people understand that. And that's what risk is. There's also business risk, meaning the business might not just survive. It could excel or it could go bankrupt. So if you happen to have a stock in a company that goes bankrupt, it will now become worthless. So you have zero ownership and be worth zero money. So why do we actually bother even talking about investments is because there's a risk-reward trade-off. As I mentioned before, banks are safe. It's not technically really an investment because they're insured. They guarantee their money. Pretty safe, right? The markets are risky because of that timing risk, business risk, just the mood of the market, what's happening in the world. It can it can change violently. During COVID, you saw, I don't know if you were watching it at all, but the market went down dramatically and then came right back. I think the Dow went back to 20,000 during COVID, and just then it's skyrocketed. And I'll talk about what those are as well, so that we all are on the same page. The markets are risky, but over the long run, if you invest in the right way, it has statistically proven that you will make more money than that bank account. This is all based on past performance. And one thing, when you talk about investments, everyone uses the same clause going back forever. Past performance is not a future indicator of performance. Although, in the military, we do it, we promote based on potential, right? You really can't use that same way in the stock market. Yes, it did great for the last 10 years. That does not guarantee you'll do great 10 years in the future. So risk is not that you'll definitely lose all your money, but you could. So understanding risk reward is part of the investment decision as you go forward. And I don't think I might have it in another slide, but I want to quickly talk about some market indexes, because we get into that. And I think I get into it later, but I want to talk about it here so that when we talk about it again, you're all up to date on it. You all hear the term Dow. Dow, it's the industrial index. You hear about the S&P 500. Those are the two big ones. There's the NASDAQ out there as well. These are market indexes. These are made up of companies and that's how they track the air quotes market. So for example, the S&P 500. The S&P 500 is made up of 500 largest companies out there. So they believe that is kind of what the market is, how these 500 companies excel, your Apple, your Amazon, those companies. That is how the economy will move forward. The NASDAQ is more technology stocks. The Dow is super overrated. I hate that they have it, because guess what? It holds 30 stocks. So the S&P 500 holds 500 stocks. Dow Jones holds 30, and they exchange them on a consistent basis. So in my personal belief, I think the Dow Jones is very overrated as an index versus the S&P 500. I believe that is a better indicator of the market. Just want to make sure we hit some terms, and they are just what the world economy, a U.S. economy, uses to kind of track a market. And we'll get into that when we talk about different things, especially tomorrow. What is TSP? Let's see if there's any questions here first. No questions. What is TSP? It is a defined contribution. So that term is something, when you actually read HR guidance, defined contribution and defined benefit are two different plans offered by the military and the FERS. Defined contribution means you are putting a defined amount into TSP. A defined benefit is you're getting something back from the government. So our pensions are defined benefit plans. We know we're getting a pension back. Defined contribution, meaning you know how much you're going to put in, you don't know how much you're going to get out. I want to just make sure that definition is out there for you. Defined contribution retirement program offered to government employees in the military. There's two options. You have the tax deferred. We call that traditional. You don't pay taxes up front, but you pay taxes at withdrawal, normally at 59.5, and we'll talk about that when we get down there. But just understanding, when I use the word traditional, that means you're not paying them up front, you're paying when you take out the money. The assumption on that is you will be making less money in retirement, so the tax rate that you're paying, marginal tax rate, if you were in the taxes class, will be less than now. So that's the whole mentality for that one. We also call that old school, because that was what the only offer that ever happened for our parents. My parents never really had the opportunity for Roth. Roth, or tax-free, meaning you pay taxes now, but you never pay them again. So you pay taxes now when they hit your paycheck, and then you invest then after all taxes are paid, but you never pay them again. They both have pros and cons. Just making sure what works best for you. A traditional one can help you reduce your income tax now. Roth, the mentality for that one is you're so used to paying taxes now when you're at a full income producing that it kind of takes away all angst when it goes to retirement. Because like, for example, say you have $1 million in your Roth TSP account when you retire and you want to go buy a $50,000 car. How that works is with your Roth, you just go take $50,000 out and you pay for the car. No impact to your taxes. Well, the vice versa, your traditional side, you just have that same $1 million account. You take $50,000 out. You now have earned income, technically unearned income, but of $50,000. So you have to pay taxes on that $50,000. So it's just how it works and how I think Roth is easier because you don't have to worry about the tax situation, but traditional, you always have to be wary of what that tax bill is going to be. So TSP is similar to the world's outside 401k plan, 403bs, if you've heard of those in the education world. And I talked about those already. For TSP, normally the age is 59 and a half when you can access it. But there is a rule that if you separate or retire from the government in or after the year you reach 55, you can actually access it. For those, it doesn't always work like that because if you think of a FERS example, if I went back into the FERS system with the time I have as a technician and Title V employee, I could retire at 57 and a half for my minimum retirement age. So at 57 and a half, I could then draw my TSP penalty free. So it actually lines up. The 55 sometimes doesn't line up unless you want to pay a penalty on your pension. But for potentially someone in the military who is still in the military, still going for the active world, for the AD column in your PCARs, and they reach 55, they could then access, when they retire, they could access their TSP. So different things, understanding, but normally we will talk 59 and a half. For the tax deferred, I think I actually had to change that date. For the tax deferred, you have a required mandatory distribution date. So for the tax deferred, you must start taking money at a certain time in your life. I think it might have moved to 73, but there is a RMD. They call it a required minimum distribution. You must take it from your tax deferred investment, or the IRS will do it for you. So just remember that RMD. TSP. All right, it is actually administered by an independent board. So it's in our best interest. That's what the whole point of TSP is a board that's managing it for the best interest of the government. So again, what is TSP? It allows military members and employees to contribute up to 100% of their base pay and bonuses, incentive, and special pays, not to exceed $24,500 a year in 2026. If you're 50 years or older, there is a catch-up contribution, an extra $8,000 you can, to not exceed $32,500. If you happen to be in a tax exempt status, for you in the military, if you get deployed to a combat zone that has combat zone tax exclusion, you can actually put up to $72,000 into your TSP. So there's some real cool things that you could possibly do. Like, for example, if you could do your re-enlistment bonus overseas in a tax-free zone, you could then take 100% of your bonus, which is already tax-free, and then put it into your 401k here, and it'll be tax-free for life. Cool, right? But that's only in the traditional world. So just remember, if you're in that situation that you're going to a tax-exempt zone, combat zone tax exclusion zone, and you want to do that, you must have your TSP going to the traditional side. You can swap it back and forth, no problem with my pay, but just remember that the Roth won't work. It's going to have to be traditional. And I just checked the RMD, the required minimum distribution date is 73. I'll fix that on the slides, and I will put the new version out there to make sure you all have it. So that I apologize for that one. So RMD on the last one, that you must take mandatory distribution dates by 73, and it goes up to 75 starting for those born 1960 or later, starting in 2033. So there's some rules out there for that one. For us who are government employees or military members, starting October 2010, this is new employees on the FERS side, you are automatically enrolled at 5%. So if you're in that situation, cool. If you've been in the service, the FERS service for a long time, this is now we're going on 16 years. I hope you're all putting your 5% in, and we'll talk about that here in a second. But just make sure everyone knows that when you become a FERS employee, you become a member of the blended retirement system. You want to make sure you're enrolled correctly into TSP because a lot of your compensation in retirement will come from matching funds. And new employees are enrolled at 5 for FERS, which is great, but always double check. Blended retirement system members, however, are only enrolled at 3%. I don't know why they did that. So if you are a BRS member, please go check what your TSP enrollment is. You want to bring it up to 5, and we'll talk about why in a second. If you're a legacy military member in the legacy pay system, you have to enroll yourself. There's no automatic enrollment. There's no matching contributions. You're just allowed to put money away for retirement in another tax beneficial environment. So remember, FERS employees, check your automatic enrollment, make sure at 5%. BRS members, recommend you bump it up to 5%. I'm not going to tell you what to do, but I recommend you bump it up to 5%, and I'll show you why. And all this automatic money is going to what they call a life cycle fund, and we will explain that later. Why matching contributions? Very important for the FERS employees and the BRS members. You get an automatic 1% contribution, cool, 1%, awesome. But if you put 5% of your own money into TSP, again, FERS and BRS members, if you put 5% in, you will get another matching 4%. So you get the 1% automatic, and then you get the 4% matching for a total of 5. Your 5 plus the government's 5 is 10% going into TSP. That's 5% free money. That is huge. So make sure your automatic contribution is at a minimum of 5 to get all the free money you can. If you put in more than 5, that's great, cool, but you still only get 5. 5 is the max you're going to get from the government. So make sure everyone's checking. And there was an issue with the BRS that the automatic enrollment and the matching contributions was not happening. They are working on it. They are fixing it. This was a big story for a while. It's because of our antiquated systems. It was an issue. It's being fixed, and everyone will be made right and whole. But just want to make sure everyone is checking if they're in BRS or they're in FERS that you have at least 5% as a recommendation to get your free money. All right, no questions. For BRS, though, it's not automatic right away. For the FERS employees, it's pretty much automatic, starts pretty quickly. But for BRS, it is a stagger on when you actually are able to get your full matching contributions. It's because they want you to, one, get through basic training. They want you, one, to get through tech school. They want you to be a full trained airman before they start matching your contributions. So they start on your 25th month of service that you actually can get the full matching contributions. Just understanding that if you're in BRS. But if you're in one of those, of course, ones who changed from legacy to BRS when it came into play, you would automatically start with that the matching contributions at the full amount, assuming you put in your 5%. So those who converted would get it, but a new airman coming in today goes to basic, won't get their full matching contributions until 25 months of service. So just in case you're on here, good to understand what your troops are actually in. Now we're going to talk about the funds that are offering. It's really good to understand what TSP offers. It's very simplistic in their offerings, which I really like. And if you're not big in the investment world, understanding ebbs and flows out there, what the markets are doing, trying to time the market, which really no one can do, TSP offers you a very simplistic investment strategy. They offer 6-ish funds. I say that because we'll talk about life cycle funds. They're a little bit different. But the G fund is government securities, pretty much T-bonds, treasury bills, backed by the full faith of the U.S. government, pretty secure. F fund is your fixed income mortgage bonds. That's more of the bond market. Potentially gives a little more higher interest rate than the G fund, but does carry a little more risk. Your C fund, common stock fund, we're talking the large companies would be in the C fund. Your more stable, large companies that are not really apt to fail unless something really bad happens. Your S fund, your small cap ones, again, those are the small cap. There is actually a designator of how much money a small cap revenue is versus a medium cap versus a large cap. So it's all based on their revenue. I can't tell you right off the bat. I used to remember what it is. It could be 10 million, 15, 20 million dollars is their revenue, or what they're worth as well. That could be designated as a small business. Riskier because it's small, but also could be very profitable because you might have someone who has designed a medical technology, for example, and boom, now it's saving lives. Boom, they now take off, and you own them. So. And then there's iFund, International Stock Fund, which is non-US. So when you see terms like global, when you invest, that is the whole world. If you see the term international, that is companies outside of the US. So the US is not included in the iFund. They're included everywhere else, but they're not in the iFund. And the L Fund, which we'll get to, is a target-based investment based upon your age. And we'll talk about that. So G Fund, I give you some more information here about what they are, the objectives of those. So they talk about for the F Fund, they match the performance of the Bloomberg Aggregate Bond Index. So they try to match that index as best they can. And this is just a snapshot of when I took them. The return right here will change based upon when you actually take the snapshot. And you can see the returns 1, 3, 5, 10, lifetime, inception. Again, I want you to understand past performance is not a future indicator of performance in the future. Just because it did well over this 10-year span doesn't mean you're going to do the same investment return over the next 10 years. Or 3 years or 5 years. Those are just guides to help you look at how well has the fund been managed. If you think about the past and what happened, if you believe the future might go that way as well, you may, hey, that makes sense to be in the G fund and I can see what actually it might get. It's all about guessing and estimating, and we'll say guesstimating, and just doing some projections based upon what you believe might happen. If you move between funds a lot, you're trying to time the market, which doesn't always work, but there are blogs, forums out there that you can listen to, watch, that talks about how to manage your TSP and how to move between funds to maximize benefits. One thing I do want to hone on here is risk. So you can see G fund is low, F fund is low to medium because it's non-US, it's the non-US treasuries. Treasuries pretty much are secure as can be because they're backed by the full faith of the government, ... But I want to talk about the expense ratio. That is here at the bottom. That is super low. So if we do $100 times, we'll just use the F fund, times 0.03, actually I have to do that wrong, wait, because that's a percentage, right? 0.035 times, let's see, this times 100. Oops, sorry, man, I can't use the calculator today. Where's my, there we go. Times 100. Divided by, I believe this, because percentages, you'll have to divide by 100. So really, fraction of a cost of what they're doing to manage your funds. That is cheap as can be. 0.034% for expense ratio is cheap. And what's an expense ratio? I know you're probably, what is that? Funds aren't free. TSP is not free. An IRA is not free. You must pay the investment company who's running TSP to manage your funds. If you have, say, an IRA in Vanguard, Fidelity, Charles Schwab, T. Rowe Price, anyone out there, they will charge you an annual expense ratio to manage your funds. The lower, the better. And when we talk about index funds, passive investing tomorrow, you'll understand lower the better. That is really cheap. I can say TSP is one of the cheapest investments you can hold, but also one of the best because we have government oversight to ensure government employees, military members are, I want to say, watched over the best we could from an investment perspective. From a fiduciary perspective, we have people watching out for us. The next funds, we'll talk about those, are CS and I. C, they match the S&P 500. The S fund goes after the performance of the Dow Jones U.S. Completion Total Stock Market Index, different one. And the I fund uses this MSCI, blah, blah, blah. So big index, the China, Hong Kong index, all that kind of stuff. That is what they're matching. You can see returns. I fund sometimes, look at 1 year return, 42.22% over the last year. That's pretty damn good, right? But doesn't mean it's going to happen because over the lifetime of the I fund, it only has returns 6.46%. Some years are going to be better than others. That is just how the mood of the market goes. Just want to make sure you understand what you're reading here and also risk, medium, high, high. So C fund is considered medium risk because it's based upon the S&P 500, which again are the 500 largest companies. You are investing in Apple, Amazon, Walmart, Caterpillar, DuPont, all these huge companies that have been around for a long time that are consistently making profits. They're trying to, work their business to keep on making money for everyone because they want to stay in business and they want to become rich. That's why it's kind of medium, because they're larger companies that have been around for a while, that have a large enough market share and revenue and capital that they're going to stay in business for a while. S fund, you can see better returns from the C fund, but also higher risk because they're going to ebb and flow. And you can see the expense ratios down here as well. Super, super cheap to own. I want to just explain those funds because it's going to translate now into the next one, in which, honestly, most experts are going to say, do this. If you want to put your retirement savings on fire and forget, this is what you want to do. All right, we got to think. I might have a question here. What happens to the members if they? What happens to them if the event of their death during the payout phase? In your TSP account, you should designate beneficiaries. So make sure in your TSP account, I hope everyone, that's a great point. Thank you, Sergeant Walsh, for bringing that up. I actually just recently did this. I double checked this. I know this is a break, but a great point to talk about. In your TSP accounts, you should designate a beneficiary. I know we always do this every year, the military-wise. We go in and do our VREDs, our emergency data card and virtual MPF there, that we go ahead and say, if I die, my last paycheck should go, or my retirement should go to XYZ, my SGLI should go to XYZ. As long as you designate a beneficiary in your TSP account, it will go to them and it becomes their 401k. So if it's a tax deferred or a Roth, it will transfer to them and become their 401k account. So they have to put it into a investment type account like a 401k or for example, a traditional IRA. It will transfer to them with no problem. It's just making sure you have beneficiaries. I looked at mine recently. I had civilian and I have military accounts. I merged them recently, which if you didn't know, you could do that through TSP. You just submit a form and they do it for you. But for one of my accounts, my wife wasn't on there as a beneficiary. So I had to go ahead and actually submit a form. I couldn't actually just do it online. So double check your beneficiaries to make sure you're good to go. And at the same time, anything, if you have a living trust, for example, living trust won't actually talk about retirement accounts. Your retirement accounts have the ability to designate beneficiaries. You can then, in theory, designate your trust as a beneficiary, and then it will flow according to how you want the money to flow. Good question. FERS, if the maximum is 24.5 and if the maximum TSP is no, you can actually do 24.5 yourself. So they can put in 24. They can't put in 24.5, so they're going to put in whatever your salary is. So it's all based on your salary and what that 5% is. So they may not get to the 24.5, but you can get to the 24.5, if that makes sense. So you have 24.5 of your money going in. You're trying to max it out the best of your ability, because that's going to be way more than 5% unless you're an SES of some sort. So that is your limit. That is the employee limit. And that's why I know it gets kind of weird why you can do so much in the tax exempt world if you go combat zone tax exclusion, because you're allowed to put the employer side in there as well. It gets really weird when you get the combat zone tax exclusion. But for your question, Major Urbana, that is yours, 24.5. All right, good questions, good questions. All right, back to life cycle funds. So again, understanding G fund, F fund, C fund, S fund, and I fund is very important of what they do, because they make up the life cycle fund. So what the life cycle fund is a target aged based retirement fund that is a fire and forget weapon that allows you to pick the right fund based upon your age. And what your goal is to pick the fund closest to when you hit 60. So for example, I was born in 1978. I will turn 60 in 2038. So I would be in between 2035 and 2040. So I could choose either. If I want to be a little less risky, I could do 2035. If I wanted to be a little more aggressive, I could do 2040 or 2045. It's based upon when you hit age 60, because what it does, and there's a cool tool, if I can actually get to tsp.gov, if it's gonna let me, if we have time, that every quarter it reallocates itself based upon your age. So for example, let's use me. Actually, I'm a bad example because I'm feel like I'm almost 60. A young airman comes in. They were born in 2000. So they're kind of fresh in, born in 2000. So they're going to hit 60 in 2060. Okay? Born in 2000, they'll be hit 60, and they're going to choose life cycle 2060. So they're in the military, and as they get older, the life cycle fund automatically adjusts to become more conservative and less risky. It tweaks ever so slightly, with the goal of it, when you're 60, it's going to be in the income fund. So it's going to be very risky. And I think I have examples, and I just want to explain that all these different options are there. But here is an example of these things, just kind of explain more what I was doing. But I'm actually going to go to tsp.gov if it lets me, to show you how these things play through. But what they'll do is automatically adjust as you get older to become less risky. So you can just start putting your money, fire and forget, your go, and that is automatically adjusting to your age. So when you're ready to claim this money, it should be basically, I think it's 75% in the G fund. It has gone from risky, because that airman's really young. 2060 is a long time away. They're very risky right now. They're on stocks. And then as they get older, it starts changing to become less risky. More in the G fund, F fund, more in the C fund. So they're now out of the I fund and the S fund. Now they're in the C fund. Now they keep on morphing. So when they hit the income fund, they're basically in the G fund, and they have conserved all of their money. What this is a great investment strategy that a lot of companies out there, they match this. Technically, Vanguard, I believe, is the first one to develop this, called target retirement funds. It just makes it so easy. You just pick your date when you want to hit 60, because that's when technically you're by law allowed to withdraw from these accounts. And they do it for you. Because I can tell you, when I was a butter bar in 2002, the 1990s were amazing for the stock market. You had people you could throw a dart at a dartboard with a newspaper, pick a stock, and you're going to make money. The 90s was just clicking. Everyone was making money. The mutual funds out there, if you don't know what that is, we'll talk about that tomorrow. They were making so much money. And then 2000 hit, a recession hit. But what happened is a lot of the FERS employees in the 90s were like, man, I'm making all this money. We go back, for example, here. I got all my money in the iFund. It's making 42%. I'm making all this money, all this money, all this money. They forgot the principle of investing. When you start needing money in the time frame of 1 to 5 years, I like to do in the 1 to 10 year time frame. If you know you're going to start needing your money, guaranteed start needing your money, you must become conservative if you absolutely need that money. If you were planning on that and the FERS employee is part of the three-legged stool, Social Security, FERS, FERS retirement and matching contributions and your TSP account. If you know you need to withdraw from that TSP account at age 60, you must take your investments and become conservative. You don't have to do all of it conservative. You can do a portion of it conservative and keep some in the riskier ones. But you must start moving your money to that less risky world. A lot of people I knew in the 90s did not do that. And they were still working in 2000s for many more years, waiting for that market to come back to what it was so they could retire. They did not follow the principles of investing, and they paid the price for it. I don't know if you have a father, grandfather, grandmother, mother. I know my cousin married a guy whose father was a professor. He is still working today, holding up a job for like his son who's a PhD in music, wants to become a college professor, but can't because there's a whole world of college professors that were trying to get their money back, but they probably have it back now. But that is what life cycles do for you automatically. I'm not saying that is perfect for you, but if you're someone who wants to just fire and forget and let the strategy and the computer-based, mathematical-based investment strategy of starting off risky because you have time, and time has shown you should be able to recover money from the ups and downs over a longer period of time. But then as you come closer to retirement, you must forget about all those gains out there and focus on keeping your money, conserving your money, preserving your money. That is the principle of L funds. I want to talk about this quick before I hop into TSP, but there also is an option in there if you don't like what they offer. You don't like this life cycle funds. You don't like the 5 different funds they carry. There is what they call a mutual fund window, which allows you to go outside of TSP and do this. I gave the web link there. Do I recommend doing it? No, I absolutely don't recommend them doing it because it costs out a lot of money. When you look at it, it's really expensive to do that versus just doing it on the outside. Much more expensive. TSP makes it easier with the simplified funds, but they also understand some people don't like what they offer and want to do other things. Maybe someone wants to invest in precious metals with their TSP money. Well, they can do that through the mutual fund window because it's not, that type of precious metal is not offered in the TSP portfolio. Pros and cons before I jump into TSP to kind of show you life cycle in real time. Pros, easy, fire and forget. Put your 5% in there if you're in FERS and BRS to make sure you get the maximum amount back from the government. And then you can do more or do something elsewhere with your retirement money, like an IRA, for example. You get matching money. Come on, right? Get your free money. The rule is min to max. Put the minimum amount in, 5%, to get the maximum back. And then if you have extra money, keep on doing it. There's higher contribution limits than you would find in the IRA worlds. IRAs have much lesser, much lower limits. Very low fees, very low fees. Simplified with the life cycle funds. Options. There is, if you're the younger side, you could possibly get a credit on your taxes for it, but it's really income based and it's really for our younger generation. The ones who made the GS7s, 9s might qualify. Our airmen up to staff sergeant might qualify for it. But once you hit 01 or probably E6, E7, you won't qualify for it, or GS11, but still check to see if you actually qualify for that. And then the ability to access at 55, if everything lines up, that's kind of cool. There is a loan option. I don't love to talk about it because it's also a con, but there is an ability for some reason if you need to take a loan from your TSP account, you can do it. What will happen is you take a loan from TSP, they will set up your repayment plan. So you're basically paying yourself back. And they do charge you an interest rate, but you're paying yourself back that interest rate. So what happens is you can't contribute additional funds to TSP while you're paying back the loan, but you pay back the loan and you're paying your back self interest. So it kind of in theory makes sense, but it's out there if you need it. And there is sometimes there's short-term and longer-term TSP loans out there. If you're interested in that, there's a lot of information on the TSP website. And there's also multiple withdrawal options when you get to retirement. You can buy an annuity if you want with it. If you just want to make sure you have guaranteed income for X amount of years, that is an option. Or you can just manage it yourself. A bunch of different options. Some cons of TSP: it's not as mobile as an individual retirement account, which we'll talk about tomorrow. TSP is like a 401k, as I said. It's linked to your employer. So the federal government offers TSP and only TSP. If you decide to get out of the federal government or the military and you go and work for a contractor, your TSP is still stuck in TSP, but you can actually move it to you can roll it over. That is an option. Or you can keep it in TSP because you're probably not going to find fees as low as you can in TSP. It's really a good offering. You can just keep it in there if you want to. More expensive if you want to do active investing, like the mutual fund window I mentioned. It's much more expensive to do it via TSP than to do it yourself. There is no investment advice, limited. TSP, if you call up TSP and say, hey, can you tell me what to invest in? They don't know. They're not going to tell you. They're not authorized to tell you. It's like I'm not authorized to tell you what to specifically do for yourself, but I can tell you on average what people recommend is to do the life cycle funds, do the target age retirement funds, because it makes sense to do it based on a mathematical model to go from risky to less risky based upon your age. However, I'm not telling you to do that, because if you want to be active in your investing, there are forums out there. I know someone who told me about a forum that this person will go out there quarterly and tell you where to move your TSP funds based upon how they're reading the market. But this is just one person's opinion. They don't know what the market's going to do. For example, if you happen to know we are going to go to war with Iran, you could have moved some money possibly into the S&P 500 where they have larger defense contractors. If they do that, they'll tell you to move it. But how would they know that? Insider trading. It's where I'm not saying don't do it. I'm saying just be very careful. There are a lot of good forums out there. Make sure it's a reputable forum to see how you can move your money around. But if you just don't want to worry about it and do the fire and forget weapon, life cycle is the way to go. And the loan options make it too easy to get access to your funds, because that's a detriment to your retirement, because you're not paying yourself back at what you really should be. For example, if you're paying yourself back at 4%, but the stock market is doing real well, paying 8%, you just lost 4%. So it's a pro and a con. There is a lot of good information out there if you want to learn more about TSP. There's a bunch of webinars by professionals that will help you understand these things. For example, contributions, TSP loans, how you can do in-service withdrawals based upon need, how you can do distributions. There you go, Sergeant Walsh, death benefits, talks about it right there. All this different learning is out there for you to kind of help you understand this stuff. All right, we've got a question here. For the 5% match, it goes to traditional TSP. Ooh. Can it be rolled over to the Roth side each year? I've actually heard that it goes to the TSP traditional side. That's a really good question. I will have to double check. I want to give you an answer right now, but I want to double check to make sure I have the latest on that one, because I've been doing some research on that one. But it's interesting. It does go to the traditional side because that's how the federal government can operate. They really can't give you. It's very hard for them to give you matching contributions on the Roth side, because technically they shouldn't be giving you tax-free money. The federal government wants their taxes, so it's cheaper for them to kind of do it that way in the end, because they get their revenue. I'll get back to you on that one. I'll post it to the chat. I'll take that question. I will copy it, and I'll post the answer to this chat so you can see it in the posts, and I'll post it as a separate thing so I can get you back to that one. So I will get back to that on that one. All right. So there's all your learning. There's my email address. If you want it, feel free to ask me any questions. But right now, I'm going to go to TSP to kind of show you an example of how L funds work. and they have a real, their website is really easy to use, really easy to use. So if you go to fund options here, and you're going to go to life cycle funds, and let's just go to you can do a compare contrast down here up to 3 funds if you wanted to do that. But let's just say, let's look at 2060 as an example. So 2060 will tell you how you should, based upon your age, how you should do it. And it just goes over its returns. It goes about what it holds right now. So for 2060, over 51% of it is in the C fund, about 13% in the S fund, and 35% in the I fund. Very little in the G and the F, because the 2060, the long time out, they're going to be riskier and how it works. Let's see if there should be a play button here. Oops, that's not what I want there. All right, let me just double check. It was, all right. And there's a mutual fund window if you're looking to look for it. Let's see, life changes. There's all these different loans things, fund performance. All right, yeah, it used to be there. They must have taken it away, and I apologize for that one because it was really kind of cool. I'm going to make sure I didn't miss it. Oh, maybe it's right there. Maybe I just hit the wrong one. No, okay. This is, instead of doing they used to do a running clock that you could press the button and it would just roll through the dates. I don't know when they changed that. That was pretty darn cool. But here's a graph. So what they're going to do is, this is 2065. I hit 2065. So what you can do is right now, I'll say right now, there, we use April. That is what is comprised of. So if you're invested in 2065 because you're going to hit 60 around the 2062 to 2067 time frame, and they recommend, if you look in here, they'll actually recommend your age brackets, but you can always go less risky or you could go more aggressive. That's your choice. But now let's watch, ready? Let's watch how it goes. So let's go to 31. All right, 31. Didn't change that much, did it? Because again, time. So now 5 years more, 20, still not too much a shift. But now, here we go. Well, the person's getting older. See how those G and F are gaining? They're getting older. And it's doing it every quarter. G fund and F fund are gaining. Boom, boom. And you see S fund is the stock fund that's going first, because it is one of the riskiest, but I fund technically is the riskiest. But you can see how that's going and it's moving. It's preserving your capital, preserving your money, so that when you hit age 60 in 2065, watch what's going to happen. And we're going to go to 2065. Boom. That's a big change, right? Now G fund is almost 65% of your money. C fund used to be 51 when you started this, like 51%. Now it's only about 16. So that's what's great about these. And you can go play around with them all you want. If you use my example, oh man, I'm sorry about this. Touchpad gives me problems. If you use me as an example, I've done 2040, then I'm 2038. All right, composition. I like the old way better. So when I started it, I joined FERS in January 2006. That's when I became a federal employee, when I left active duty and joined the Vermont Air National Guard as a technician. So when I started 2040, I don't know if it was actually in existence then, but this would be an example of it. I would have about 15% locked in, because again, TSP, this is not something they offered from the beginning. These have morphed over time when they actually became something, which Vanguard basically designed these. So this one's a little bit weird, but okay, when I hit 2038, just watch how my money is changing. So as I went along, let's bring it up to today. All right, 2026, we'll just say, come on, July. We'll say July. Pretty much 28% of my money is kind of locked in the safe side, but I still have a considerable amount in the stock market to be aggressive because I'm still only 47, right? I got 13 more years. So boom, I'm watching my money. Boom, 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 boom. And I'm 60, well, a little over 60. 70% of my money is in the bond funds. So I just want to show you those as an example. Mess around with the website. It's a great website. If you've never logged into your TSP, please do so. That's where you're going to do your beneficiaries. Very important that you go log into TSP and get your information. And TSP, for example, if you don't have your information, what they normally do is they will send you information based upon what's in the military pay system. So if you don't have a correct address in the military pay system, they're going to send it to a wrong address. So one, check your MyPay, make sure your address is correct. And then if you don't have your TSP login information, go ahead and say, I need my stuff, and it's going to send you to the military pay address on files. So always make sure your address is up to date. That's one thing we always have to look for. I'm going to go back to the questions here because I saw something pop in. Okay. There's some information. Looks like someone might have found the information. So let's actually go ahead and answer. In a Roth and plan conversion, yes, thank you for bringing that up. That is something that's brand new. I actually have a guy at work who told me all about what his plan was to do, because when he started, he was traditional, and now he's doing conversions. And you don't have to do your full conversion all at once. You can do conversions along the way over a few years. Thank you for bringing that up. There is the answer to your question. You can do that. One thing to understand, again, thanks Sergeant Mason for doing that. One thing to understand about conversions, it's a taxable event. If you do convert your traditional TSP to a Roth TSP or a traditional IRA to your Roth IRA, it becomes a tax event because your traditional side is tax deferred. You never paid taxes on those contributions. So as it moves from a tax deferred to a tax free, they're going to send you a tax bill. So that's why my friend at work is doing it in pieces so he can minimize his tax issue. Because we go back to part 2, taxes, marginal tax brackets. He's actually doing it pretty smartly. He's watching his marginal tax bracket to ensure he doesn't incur a larger tax bill than he's used to. There's ways to get around it. So again, that's a great article. Highly recommend you reading it, but there is a way to do it. And it's weird that the matching contribution does go to your traditional TSP, but also those matching contributions should be going to a life cycle fund based upon your age. So that's one of the cool things is when you get enrolled BRS or FERS, they should be putting the money into a life cycle fund, but always double check that, because back in the day when I came in, it all went in the G fund. I had a lot of people back in the day when I used to give all these classes, they said, I've never logged into TSP. I said, you better log into TSP, because guess where all your matching contributions went to? They went to the G fund. So for years and years and years and years, this person was getting matching contributions, but they were getting at the lowest possible rate. Now they've changed it. It's going to a life cycle fund because that makes the most investment sense for most of the majority of people out there. So double check your TSP account. Make sure your investments are going in the right location. Make sure your matching contributions are going in the right location. Double check that you have traditional or Roth, but depending on what you want, you can flip-flop between them. If you're going to a combat zone tax exclusion area, you might want to look at doing a traditional TSP so you can sock away some more money, all tax-free, because you're in a tax-free zone, so you never have to pay taxes on it, right? Way to go. It's how they do it. I will stay on for questions. I will stop recording here in a second. I will stay on for questions. And also, I'll be available tomorrow and also available via email. You all have my email address. It's on the last page of the slides. I will update the slides to change the RMD date to 73. But just please feel free to ask me questions along the way. I'm happy to assist in any way I can. I will stop recording now, and I will stay on for 15 minutes or so if anyone has any questions. But if you don't feel like asking questions in the group, I'm going to be getting off my government computer here because I'm on terminal leave. Send it to my personal email, and I'll be more than happy to answer your questions as they pop up.